Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It is time to bring the orange, and we are there. We are at episode 6 of our foundational 15 architectural decisions. Joining me, if you've been following along in this series, JD Wallace.
We made it.
We made it. Andrew Miller.
Somehow, whenever you do that, I always jump when I'm in person. When we're doing it over Zoom, it's like, I hear you, but here's wow, there's energy there.
Jump as much. And I was wandering the hallway as we were getting ready to do this, and there was a Boyz II Men song that came to mind, which is End of the Road. Although we've come to but it's not the end, because this is designed to get people thinking and talking more about these. But we are at the end of the road of this series.
Another 15 years, we're going to do this again because it'll still be relevant, right?
Still be relevant.
Probably.
That's what we've been proving throughout these, if you've been watching. So we've been going through the 15 architectural decisions. We're talking about what they are, how they compare within the industry, as well, why they matter to you if you're one of the users of storage and infrastructure out there, or you're considering Pure. Really interesting to dig in. And we're really excited, right, for this last one. We've saved some of the most foundational pieces for the end, proactive and predictive support. And I'll pull that back a little. We're really going to dive into that thing called Pure One. And then, of course, Evergreen, which we initially, as part of this, would have called maybe non-disruptive everything or non-disruptive upgrade for everything, but turned it Evergreen, an architecture as well as a philosophy. So I will tell you, the viewer, the listener, this one's going to be meaty, but it's really important that we are meaty. All right, enough with that. Let us dive in. Proactive and predictive support. So yes, there are elements. It is really cool. There are great stories over the time of Pure about how we will show up at a customer site and know that we need to fix something because we're analyzing the telemetry data of what's getting phoned home to us. But really, it had to start somewhere. Every company that makes storage has monitoring. They have management, right? It's something that goes hand in hand. How do we get started? And what is this thing that we call Pure One?
I'll maybe start with when I was a customer.
Oh, yeah.
That's all right. So these were other products that it was actually before Pure was even started, right, kind of thing. So you'd have normal stuff that would happen, whether it was, you'd have a drive fail and you might have to go and put a ticket in, kind of thing. Or you'd want to do some performance monitoring across more than one array. You need to set up a physical server or a virtual machine, and there'd be something that would pull information there, kind of thing. But the amount of information that was actually going back to the manufacturer was very, very little. One company that I started working with started to change that with what was called auto support at the time. This is giving credit where it's due without calling out company names. And then when I was even on the partner side, you could log in and start to see what was some of the information about systems before you went and met with a customer. So it's this era where this is the very beginning of a phone home, and even some systems didn't even have it at all, to be honest. So there's the idea from Pure that, hey, and actually let me put one other thing in there. You also knew that whenever you called into support, you would need to set aside, I don't know, say like half your day. You'd call in, you get the level 1 person, you do some general things, you'd upload this log. You basically knew, I just had to reserve half or all of my day before I even bother making this call. If it's 3 p.m., I got to wait till tomorrow unless it's an emergency issue kind of thing. So that was like the time that you were living in, and even kind of the customer expectation. Very reactive, manual, maybe a little bit starting to happen online, but not very much kind of thing. I know you were a customer then too, JD.
Yeah, and I mean, just think about it. We still had, I think some businesses still had fax machines back then. So to think about, really, this was the genesis of starting to do things like this. I can finally start to use cloud-based services to send this data back, actually maybe use some machine learning, start processing these things, start getting some value out of them. And so, this is one of those things that if you kind of put yourself go back in time again, put yourself in the shoes of these folks, 10 or 15 years ago, we're still a startup. Yeah. We're still scrappy for resources. We're still trying to make really efficient use of those investment dollars that we're getting. And what for any data center company, what's a big part of the bottom line? It's the cost of support, right? Yeah. The human cost. And, I think we realized pretty early on that if we could invest in automating some of this, not only would it be a value for the customer, not only would it give us the opportunity to improve their experience, become happy, Pure customers, but it also potentially give us the opportunity to be more efficient in how we serve our customers and, maybe save a little money on the support side.
Yeah.
Cost savings, higher customer satisfaction. So a little bit of what was done at first. And this one actually won't be super, it'll be meaty, like you said, Rob, but not super technically deep. Started with doing arrays, doing phone home, sending telemetry data. Maybe telemetry is a fancy word for logs, but we're doing more with it than just a syslog server kind of thing.
Yep.
Originally, this was every 30 seconds, every hour, every 24 hours kind of thing.
I think different payloads at different times, right?
Depended,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
One day a big payload and then incrementally smaller
Yeah.
things.
Critical things were going to go out more quickly, more reporting over time would go out less frequently. Makes sense. And so originally, this was not necessarily even customer exposed. It was actually for our support team. So we could start to do fingerprinting of bugs because, hey, if we could be proactive about, like, we saw this version of firmware have this issue and we could let everybody know that we need to push this upgrade over to you or deal with something, we could actually have proactive fingerprinting of bugs, whether they're bugs in our code or things that we've components that we pulled in that are, industry type components. And then also you could start to go toward, hey, if someone calls in, instead of doing the classic level 1, can I get through the gate to get to the level 2, level 3 support person? You can jump basically directly to a level 2 or a level 3 support experience because the support engineer you talk to already has a really good sense of what your system is doing.
Yeah.
And maybe even why you're calling in potentially, because you could have some analysis saying, like, there were already this hotspot, and you call in, and as that call's getting routed to that support engineer,
Oh yeah.
it might come up with some nice flags.
Let me pull that up, and I'm going to take a look at what's going on right now, which is a really interesting and novel thing to go right to that L3 kind of experience.
And then even now, proactive and predictive, maybe we started to actually notice issues before customers. So this is both a level of the looking at, bugs or updates that needed to be done, but even saying that we got to the point where I've heard different statistics here, so I want to be careful in a public forum, 50, 60, 70, 80%, it's ranged. The amount of our support tickets that are actually opened proactively by Pure before the customer opens them. Maybe they would have opened them or noticed it anyway, but we that's now jumping like forward. That's where we got to, but there was this genesis like, ooh, what if we can actually notice the issue before the customer calls in?
Yep.
Well, that's pretty crazy and amazing.
And there's actually a story that I know Kaz told one time from this era that I think really kind of puts it in concrete terms. This was the time frame where we were just starting to come out with 16 gig fiber channel support, right? And so we had folks that already had flash arrays in their data centers running 8 gig, wanted to move to 16 gig. Well, there's two components of that. There's the software side to enable that.
Right.
And there's the actual physical card
You need
itself.
the card. Yeah.
And there was a scenario where customer had the card installed, but was still running an older version of firmware that there was some known issues with. Customer had never experienced any problem. So it was still working for them. But because we were able to identify the potential problem from other customers, create a fingerprint for it in our system,
Yeah.
we were able to go and say, hey, we have seen this particular issue. You are at risk of this issue. We need you to go back to 8 gig until you're able to install that particular version of software that has that fix in it. And so preventing customers from ever running into that potential problem. And that's just kind of one concrete example of how we're using
Avoiding flakiness, basically, or potential flakiness. Again, it's all about avoiding disruption to normal operations and staying up and running. Fingerprint, you just pointed out and
Keyword.
said it before. Why are we honing in so much on the word fingerprint here?
So we're looking at, in the beginning, hundreds of arrays, then thousands of arrays, then tens of thousands of arrays, similar increase in customer count.
Yeah.
So you think about the number of combinations that could be out there from either an environment standpoint, from the SAN fabric, vendor, switches. There's a huge amount of combinations in there. So fingerprint being the idea that we can actually, how we can practically narrow in on what would be the commonality you're referring to then go and proactively reach out to folks. This is also yet another building block in the how 6 nines becomes real.
Sure.
Right, kind of thing. Because we're going to say that sounds really great and we're not doing the cheat card of taking out for migration time or upgrades, et cetera.
Measured. I always say measured, like actual measured availability. Well,
to the
uptime,
end
uptime.
application, the end user, right?
Yeah.
Or the business. But this is yet another big building block in that, because if we can tell someone, hey, let's keep going into the scenario, you need to go from the 16 gig to the 8 gig temporarily while you make sure you don't run into this. Well, that's a scenario where they didn't have downtime.
You're still up. Yeah.
So it appreciably works in. Now, this was then a foundation for so much more, because everything we've talked about wasn't customer visible. It enhanced your support experience, and maybe even made your support experience proactive, which is a little mind blowing. You get a call, not just like, hey, this drive failed, there's a new one on the way, but a higher level of order capability than that. But what if you start to say, we have all this telemetry data, now really embracing telemetry is like, it's a real thing. What could we do with this that we could expose to a customer?
Mhm.
Now, there were also a couple philosophies about how to do this at the time. And I actually used to run this of, would be like, hey, here's a installer that you download, you run a virtual machine, you run it inside your environment. You're only ever going to do so much with that as an organization, because you can only ask your customer to give you so much CPU and RAM and other things to manage the systems that you're already paying them a lot of money for. Man, I got too enthusiastic there, so there we go. Okay. So you can only ask for so many resources to manage. So we said, hey, we're going to look at this and say, we're already hosting all this log and telemetry data centrally. We should build a customer-facing interface for this. That was the evolution of Pure One, or the genesis of Pure One kind of thing. And what can you do at that point? It's almost like the sky's the limit. What might you want to do? You might want to do, how fast is my system growing, factoring all the deduplication. You might want to do commonality across workloads to make recommendations to customers. You might want to do better alerting. So you go down the sidebar in Pure One, there's so many things there, and they were just added one at a time, just building off that.
But I also feel like a lot of these came in as part of deliberate listening, right? So, I mean, one of the things we do really well here, and there's partly a process and there's partly just we anecdotally collect things that multitudes of customers tell us. And so think about something like a VM Analytics after you've heard from the 50th or 100th VI admin that it's really complicated to trace where the VM is and where it goes into the backend storage, or
ESX top is painful.
Yes, when you see the 200th person with giant gory spreadsheets to do manual capacity planning, then those are things that are very easy indicators for us to say, oh, okay, we have all this telemetry data. We used to use the word trillions of data points. We're probably
Beyond
still
that?
there. Beyond, I'm not sure. It's a lot, but that was in the verbiage around Pure One when I started here. And then you go off and you create those things. But with the caveat, you can't go overboard. Think back a couple episodes ago, JD, when we were talking about efficiency metrics, right? It's analogous. Make sure it's things that people actually want to use, functionality that adds value, and we don't overwhelm them with too much. But a lot of these tools, the VM Analytics, the workload planner, the workload simulator, all those are things that were because we were able to gain this trust with customers to trust us with their data, but also because of what we demonstrated over time with the proactive support and helping them, and that we could see different things and these fingerprints.
And this is a little bit of a bonus, but
Yeah.
years later, so you can imagine as a startup, where did all this data go when it came in initially? Went to the cloud.
Yes.
But over time, like many of our customers we talk to, there are different items, there are different options available that are tuned for certain things. And while a lot of the primitives that we wanted to use to actually process this data were very powerful and available in the cloud, the data pool itself was growing and growing and growing as we're onboarding more and more customers. And so eventually, and we actually use this, we use ourselves as a
It's a
customer
great
reference
pure-on-pure example.
for a
right?
long time, but we actually went and said, hey, we're going to go use the cloud, what it's really great for, which is processing this data. We're going to pull the data itself out. We're going to put it in FlashBlades at a colo really close to the cloud from a networking perspective.
High-speed interconnects.
And we're gonna build our own hybrid cloud scenario, and it's been a really great story that we can tell customers to say we've actually lived this, we've done it
Yeah,
ourselves.
we went through it. We were pushing stuff into the cloud until we needed to take a different look at the cost model. And it's not, again, similar message to when we had one of the cloud people on stage at a large event for Pure recently. We're not saying don't go use the cloud. We're just saying use the
Right
cloud
tool for the right
where it
thing.
makes sense, and then pull the data back that you need, and look at that cost savings for where else that you can go deploy it. But yeah, that's a great pure story. I talked with one of the members of the security team like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, "What do you guys do for SIEM? What do you do for that?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, we run that on FlashArray. Like, it's an amazing solution with Splunk." And I said, "Well, why'd you choose FlashArray?" I said, "Well, I've used other storage, but X, Y, and Z are the reasons why, and we have access to all this telemetry data. These Pure on Pure stories are really great. So
Well, in the software industry, there's also a great phrase we love, either eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne.
yeah, I mean, I like saying like knowing how the bread, showing how the bread is made,
Sure.
that kind of thing. You know, that kind of, or the airplanes, right? We tend to hit that. Nobody eats dog food.
I think I'll segue from that.
Yeah.
I don't have a segue. Actually, there was some other stuff I wanted to toss in there. So if we think about Pure One, there was a piece there of sometimes nervousness from customers about what data is going into it. So fundamentally, it was your data stays on your Pure array in your data center. Period. This is the very early days of the cloud kind of thing.
Right.
So it's only kind of metadata information that's getting transmitted up. And of course, we have customers that are sometimes what you refer to as dark sites, and
we
there's
don't.
different levels of transmission there and
You
what
have
they can
choice.
send up.
Right.
So this isn't required, but it's very great value add. And there's also the philosophy that from the very beginning, Pure One was an online management platform, but it was a read-only console. Now, what's interesting in the last couple of years is we've seen this increasing growth on the networking side and the consumer side and the storage side of the management plane, sometimes moving to have cloud-based components. But one of the early things that helped people be comfortable with Pure One before any of the other companies were doing this was that I don't have to worry and talk to my security team about something in the cloud that, hey, can do way more than I would ever do on-prem from an analysis standpoint, actually reaching back into the data. Now we're following modern trends with that as far as what customers want to do to manage its scale and drive self-service upgrades, et cetera. But there was some intentionality about how we rolled that out over time.
It is really interesting. I was at some user group meetings. It's kind of related. Like we've added in all this functionality. We've added in the capability to do really interesting things with users. Yet there's still also those users out there who want to do it their own way, like the way they used to, or the way that they previously did on Pure.
Sometimes they need to.
That's great.
Sometimes it's just
Yeah.
hey, it's the comfort level.
Yeah,
So,
it's the comfort level, and it was specifically around some of the new Copilot-y things that were out there, and one of the admins we had in the room was like, well, I don't want to use that interface. I just want to go off into my dashboards and go discover it myself. Cool. Have at it. Have it your way, right? It's up to you.
Go data mining.
Go data mining. That's it. Anything else on this one? Are we putting a bow on proactive monitoring, on Pure One in general? Like there's so many new things that we could hit, but that's not the purpose of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to start with the foundational principle, and we've definitely shown a few areas where it's evolved. There's other podcasts that I've done, that we've done, where we've gone into a lot of the new feature functionality. But anything else we put a bow on it?
the only final thought is, and someone here is gonna go Google me on this, but the idea of that organizations ship their org chart. It's a rule sometimes we hear about, kind of thing. So what we've just talked about is so important to Pure that we actually have a part of the business called our digital experience business, DX, led by Prakash Darji currently. And he's pretty public, and he's fun to listen to, and you've had him on the pod, and he's been an accelerate kind of thing. But this is, well, I'm going to leave out numbers as far as the amount of people. This is a significant amount of engineering. These are product managers, et cetera. So we're not just saying this, what started out, and this is even separate from our whole support organization that uses some of these tools, but along with FlashArray and FlashBlade and Portworx, and this is actually a division inside Pure that is so important that there's a very notable number of people dedicated to continuing on this vision and realizing it more fully.
And they're sometimes the most fun and interesting people to talk to, because they're thinking of really out there
Out of the box.
ideas.
Yeah.
And when they're doing those out of the box ideas, you're scratching your head going, I can't do that, or why would they do that? And then they do that, and it ends up being something really interesting and really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And our customers love to see it. So that is a good bow on that one. Okay, let's hit the last one. Let's hit 15.
We made it.
I will say the biggest challenge going through this, listener, viewer, was for us to not talk about Evergreen as much and save it for this. And
We
there were
mentioned
a
it.
few instances where it got mentioned, but I think in the meetings that we've had in between recording the series, that's been the biggest challenge, because it is so fundamental. It is so foundational.
Pervasive.
Everything that we do. And I even mentioned on the last episode with the 3 E's, the effortless, the efficient, and the evergreen. One of the E's was so important that it was evergreen. But what we're trying to do here for you, the viewer, the listener, is start with the architecture, right? Evergreen has evolved into a number of things. It gets interpreted different ways. There's different aspects to it. There's flat and fair. There's, there was a thing called free every 3, right? There were all these programs woven into it. But what we want to do here is really focus on the architecture, the philosophy,
the foundation.
Right.
Yeah, everything truly is leading to this point. So
Yes.
we needed the foundation of, very much to think of the system as its personality apart from the hardware.
Love that personality.
The personality apart from
Love
the
that.
hardware. And once we unlocked that, and so many of these architectural decisions were about creating the underpinnings that could unlock that.
Mhm.
But once we unlocked that, once we decoupled those two, it allowed us to go be really creative and build these programs. Look, Evergreen is unique to Pure, not because others in the market couldn't go have that idea,
Mhm.
but because they don't have those architectural underpinnings to actually support a program like that. To be able to say, hey, an array can now live forever because I can, what did we talk about in the last episode? Pull the drives out and ship them across country.
Every single bit of the hardware can
Because-
orbit around the data.
Exactly. It unlocks everything. And we're not done with that evolution. So we did a really great job building this core foundation for each array that unlocked Evergreen. But now we are continuing to innovate and thinking about how we take that same thing that we built for one array and bring it to a fleet of arrays.
And this one truly maybe goes to the heart of the cause mantra of wanting to fix everything that was wrong with storage. I think if you look at one that
Mhm.
perhaps over time has caused the most pain across the widest swatch of the organization, it is the mandatory forklift upgrade,
Mhm.
the mandatory data migration, the outage, the downtime, the scheduling,
The risk, the
the
time.
planning, the risk, the time that goes with it. I mean, it is quite an amazing value prop.
Mhm.
If you're just in an elevator with somebody considering Pure Storage for 30 seconds to go,
I never have to do all of that again.
you never want to do these things again.
You never wanted to do them from the beginning.
Right.
We just got conditioned of all that. This is how it works.
You just didn't know
right?
there was an alternative, right? And so that's the part that's really powerful. But to JD's great point, you had to design for it, right? It didn't just happen by accident. You had to look at, okay, what does it take to have an array, right? The video that was shown last year, an array that somebody hadn't done anything with for 10 years that was running, that we finally said, oh, well, let's come in and upgrade this. Is
And
it
it
the
all
same
goes.
array? Is it a different array? I don't want to get into a Ship of Theseus thing here, but
For those not aware, Ship of Theseus, the
Yes.
ancient Greek ship, that every
Yes,
single
we will.
component
We
got
are gonna
replaced
get into
over
it.
time. Because you just made that throwaway reference, and I'm assuming everyone is up on their Greek mythology
I wanted
here.
everybody to go, internet search on it, right?
So that means I'm done. Go internet search.
Go ahead, go. No,
Yeah.
it does make sense.
The accounting standards
Mhm.
do actually say that you can replace everything. It still be the same item from a depreciation standpoint. So
So the
you know,
accounting
that's
standards are certainly very important.
And no, I'm not an auditor or an
But
accountant.
based on my
So-
decisions on, I know.
The maybe I'll just go back, continue to play out one more
Play it
piece
out.
from 2009.
Right.
When we were talking about this, we didn't actually necessarily have the data points to say that this would be a reality 10, 15 years later. But the statements there were a core, non-disruptive controller replacements, and this means non-disruptive, not just taking downtime, but without performance impact. Back when we talked about the controller architecture, active standby on the back end kind of thing, and non-disruptive shelf replacements. What's really funny is in one document that we looked at the time when it was written, it wrote coming soon because we knew how we were going to do it,
Right.
how we were going to actually be able to shuffle the data around between flash modules, et cetera. But we were still in the middle of implementing it kind of thing. Now, fast forward, while that was actually the statement, the goal there was to never take a downtime again and to do 6 nines, including maintenance windows. What's crazy is this is stuff that was written down in 2012, 13, 14, 15 vintage. I mean, it dated back to 09. We're now at the point in 2025 where we actually can say across Pure Fleet, we actually have 6 nines of uptime.
Yeah.
Maybe even somewhat edging up to, maybe not quite at 7 nines, but up to 6 nines. And we actually can say sometimes there's 2 stats that I love in this of it's easy Okay. Most CIOs will not probably listen to this whole series. I would love it if they did. Maybe it can like nourish their technical soul. But sometimes you need like you need quantitative shortcuts when you're having a conversation. So the quantitative versus the qualitative. We've told lots of stories and architectural stuff here. The quantitative is we now are at the point where we can say 97% of Pure systems that are 5 years and older are still in production. And it's not because they're like in the sense of like you're ready for them to take a fast drop off the loading dock because you're so ticked off with it kind of thing out of your data center, but they've actually been renewed. The controllers, the modules, anything that matters in there. Or we can also say more than 30,000 systems have had hardware controller upgrades even between families kind of thing. And if I'm getting a little bit confrontational, not too much when I'm working with a customer saying like, hey, these are our numbers for these things, 97% in service, 30,000. You may be saying you're seeing the exact same thing on the slides from insert competitor name here. Cool. Flattery is the greatest form of imitation. Oh no, wait a minute, it's the reverse. Yeah, that got everyone.
That was
like,
actually,
oh wait, what's he going to say?
An episode title with Kevin Rickson for the podcast back in 2019, I think.
But ask them, whoever else you're talking to, what our number's 30,000. What's their number? Our number's 97%. What's their number? Our number's 6 nines of uptime. Not without taking out maintenance windows. What's their number? At this point, what's so cool is that the architectural decisions that we have been playing out for 15 years, we now have the data behind it to say it's not just these amazing concepts that we know will work architecturally. We know they work in real life.
There's a number of generations. I think that was one of the other stats that's on that slide. I know what you're talking about, where it's 8 generations, or maybe I'm off by 1, maybe it's 9. I've lost track. But also that initial thing was a flash array thing, right? So this philosophy has been built into other
It's in Cloud Block Store
products that we've
in
brought out.
FlashBlade.
Yes, right?
It's one of our favorite things to do is to show a customer the genealogy
Yes.
of their system. Here's where you started, and here's how you've evolved over time, and here's where you are
One
today.
thing, right?
There's literally a genealogy view in Pure One where you can actually see. I was looking at this 2 weeks ago at a customer EBC, and an SE that was on his game literally pulled it up in the middle of an EBC and flipped his laptop around and was showing actually an executive who hadn't seen this before, like, hey, this array, it started 8 years ago, and here's all the hardware and software upgrades that have been done, and there was never any downtime. It's just this fun moment. The visualization is
I think
awesome.
we're doing a session. I think we're doing a short flash talk at Accelerate on this too, where they're going to show the power of the genealogy, just to look back, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 5, whether it's 8 or more, right? To see what happened over time.
That
what
was your
changes
Accelerate sneak preview.
There's more sneak preview that we can do, but yeah, that was one of them. Where to?
So if we play out, so a little bit of the history, there's some numbers and quantitative. The other lens sometimes that we'll put on this is storage that acts like software as a service, or that kind of acts like cloud on-prem. And I'm going to rattle through a couple things here. This isn't meant to be just reading off, but it's usually a slide that I'll walk through and helps people kind of get it. So bear with me, unless you want a tag team with HG Day. You can see the iPad too. So deploy one time, and then you can upgrade in place forever without any
Downtime.
planned or unplanned, and without any data
Loss.
or migration. You're not losing the data, hopefully. You're not having to migrate the data. I'm going to step out of the side now. This is now a discussion 3 weeks ago with a different set of customers. And
I didn't know there was going to be a test, Andrew.
Yeah, we went into a game show too. That was like Password Plus with the guess the word.
I got really nervous all of a sudden.
Yeah, the password is
So-
loss.
ask them. They're partly Pure and they're partly on another system. That
Yeah.
other system, they brought in some major upgrades, some pretty big iron type stuff 2 years ago, and just we're having a friendly conversation. It's like, okay, so how is that new system working for you? And they're like, actually, I really can't tell you because 2 years in, we're less than halfway through migrating over to it.
Duh.
And it was like, and do you actually expect to be finished migrating before the lifespan's
Right,
over?
you
And
get
it's
to
like
3 to 4 years.
it was a friendly conversation. We're
Right.
not poking at each other. It's almost
Right.
this like kind of remorseful, kind of thing. And so no data migration is so impactful. It's this little phrase, but not having to do it at all. You got a thought?
No, I don't. I'm nervous you're going to quiz me again.
Full performance. So that's even as you're doing all this stuff, you're not taking performance impact. That's our active standby. You can modernize hardware and software for 10 plus years across multiple generations. And now we're into CFO territory.
Right.
Investment protected, without rebuys. And one fun thing here, so we're kind of wandering all around Evergreen, is sometimes there's a total cost of ownership, TCOs or ROIs, et cetera, return on investment. We'll sometimes see the numbers for these. Often these will be, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the depreciation lifespan is. If you work with Evergreen, and this may be on Evergreen Forever, which is the way better than average CapEx approach that built the company, but then you have a consistent subscription, your support fee, it can include the control upgrades. You can sometimes push that depreciation life cycle out noticeably further, legitimately from an accounting standpoint. And man, we started with this architecture, and we got into business programs and no migration teams and stuff that matters up to the accounting team. The impact of this just goes all over the place in good ways.
Well, it's the personal, right? And people that are frequent listeners know my favorite anecdote about Evergreen, but since we might be hitting new audiences here, I'll hit it again just in case. But it was Microsoft Ignite in 2019, standing at the booth, not many people around.
Yeah.
Guy wanders up. Hey, what's your name? Where do you work? What do you do? He's a DBA. Can't remember geographically where he was. He said, I just want to come up and talk to you guys, just say hello and just thank you. And I went, oh, okay. Well, are you running Pure? He's like, I don't know much about storage. I'm a DBA. I don't care about it so much. But we brought you guys in a year ago. And for the last 8 months since we got you installed, I've had 6 weekends back with my family because we didn't have to do these crazy migrations, upgrades, everything. And again, they might not have been that operationally sound because that sounded like a lot. That was when it really clicked for me. That was the human value. I don't know, JD, have you ever gotten one of those with the human impact where somebody kind of anecdotally told you the impact that Pure was making?
I think that's a pretty powerful story, and I'm struggling to find something that can.
That's all right. That's all right. We can roll with that one.
Yeah,
this is going back a little bit. This is part of Evergreen, but we're in a little bit of recap mode. We're in capstone mode and foundation mode. Someone that it's a fun one. Someone that came up to the Pure booth, and this was before I joined, actually, from a gentleman we saw the back of his head in one of these videos when we were rewatching, so it reminded me of it, where he came up and said that Pure saved his marriage.
Yeah,
and you're kind of like, that feels a little bit over the top. So it turned out the gentleman was a VDI admin at a company. And if you go back in time, that you actually had to do what was called recomposes and updates on the desktops, et cetera, kind of thing. And he had to do these on evenings, and then the environment was growing dramatically, and then he had to do it on the weekends, and he wasn't at home very much. And frankly, any kind of relationship that you have in your life takes time, fundamentally, whether it's a good relationship or not, it takes time. And so they brought Pure in, and suddenly he didn't have to do this stuff on the weekends. He didn't have to do it in the evenings. He didn't have to take downtime and change windows for a very large VDI environment. And he was able to spend enough time at home with his family. Now, I'm sure there were other dynamics going on, so I'm not going over the top in the claim here. And no, there's no skew on there for, this stuff. But it was actually the human impact was really huge. And this is where I even tie this back to, this is where sometimes I'll talk about NPS in real life, so Net Promoter Score. Mm-hmm. I think we've all spent time at conferences. Probably folks listening to this have been at conferences, and you can feel this when you have people come up to a Pure booth. There are some people that aren't happy. This is life. But the vast majority of folks, they're coming up actually saying, like, how this actually helped me out. I got time back. It's simple. I'm a happy customer. And I just like to accumulate stories. And you accumulate these over time, like you're saying, Rob.
They're good. Yeah. Well, and you must remember as an admin some of the pain that you had to go through for these things as well, right?
Absolutely.
Firsthand.
Absolutely.
And so now to work at a place where that's no longer an issue.
I remember one weekend, it was actually New Year's Eve.
No.
Actually New Year's Eve, and I got a call.
True story.
True story. I was in the names will be left out to protect the guilty, but that's how I spent my New Year's Eve, was in the data center fixing some storage. If only I had Pure back then.
If only. If only.
I got free Mountain Dew when I was doing network overnight upgrades. So previous Andrew appreciated the free Mountain Dew and the Papa John's pizza, I think, at the time, or whatever pizza it was. That's not trying to be an advertisement.
They could do. It's the least. That they
but today's Andrew, I don't want to be doing that anymore. Yeah. And most people, it's not like you want to do that.
No. So no. Let's take it home, right? I think the last thought was just going to be on how and where it's gone and evolved. I think we hit the customer impact. We certainly got into it from an architectural and a foundational standpoint, as well as, the high points, right? You walk through, and those are always great to hear about.
So the kind of some of where it's gone, and now this is being relatively brief, so I don't go too far, but for a long time there was Evergreen as the architecture, and then there was various programs around that, such as like there was for a while called Free Every 3. You paid your regular support, and then every 3 years you get new controllers. We've morphed that some as frankly Intel timelines have changed, the internal processors and things, but there's this core principle of you maintain your support. It's a subscription to innovation in the sense that you not only get free software upgrades, but free hardware upgrades without downtime and disruption from a controller standpoint. Of course, if you need more capacity, you need to pay for that, right, kind of thing. But then that also became the foundation for saying, hey, there's this whole thing called the cloud and subscription-based, and people sometimes it is more than just a capital expense or an operational expense, but there's a component of that. And that leaves the opportunity, if you really do this right, to do a consumption-based model. The only way you can do a real consumption-based storage as a service model is if you have an underlying architecture that doesn't ever require downtime or data migration. I think that's where you're going a little bit earlier, JD, of like, hey, this Evergreen enables stuff that other people actually can't do at a business model standpoint.
Yeah, we've evolved from a point where we are building products that are cloud-like to evolving to actually building clouds. We talk about the enterprise data cloud, how we're starting to think, we started with system think, and now we're expanding that into fleets of systems. And how do we build entire infrastructures that embody all of these characteristics of simplicity and so forth and so on. And so, that exists today, but that's where you're going to continue to see investment from us, continue to hear us talking about things like the enterprise data cloud, Pure Fusion, those kind of enhancements.
That's the next frontier, really, is setting up policy and setting up how you want to operate, and then step back.
Yeah.
Right? And let the intelligent storage do what you need it to do, but also then to subscribe to it, to align. I always love this. Align what the business needs, right? There's always a gap between IT and business, right? If they both knew more about what each side of the house were doing, things would be a lot smoother. But let IT understand what business is doing, then go align the storage requirements to that. Similarly, business, tell IT what you need. Let them go do their job. We can help satisfy both sides of the house.
What I love is some of what you're referring to, like enterprise data cloud and Fusion and fleets. I've seen some of those concepts and slides from other vendors or presentations for 5, 10, 15 years, but they didn't have the underlying building blocks that we just spent however long going through to actually make that work well in real life. So there's a level of almost kind of craftsmanship to, I want to build this beautiful thing, but if the components that I'm using don't actually fulfill what they need to do, I can talk about all this, but this is where we start to get to the idea of true according to PowerPoint or architectures, et cetera. And start to be really careful. I'm not trying to like throw FUD at competitors, but recognizing we have building blocks that truly work at this stuff and allows us to achieve these much larger vision in a more real, actual way for the practitioners, as well as for the architects and the CIOs.
More than a buzzword.
Yeah.
More than a buzzword.
And the CFO and the finance side.
Yeah.
Right. And the finance. That happened at a recent show. It was an Oracle show, actually. And it was a head of procurement walked up to the booth. Said, "Oh, you're a data storage company." Yeah. My storage team is driving me crazy right now. Oh, why? Well, they keep under provisioning, they keep under buying what they need for storage, and about every 2-3 months they're coming back to me saying they need more. They're being too conservative. Do you all have anything that solves that? Let me tell you about Evergreen One, right? And we had a 7 to 10 minute conversation, and then I hooked him up with the team that covers that account. I don't know where it's gone. That was a few months ago, but it was the right thing. And I didn't talk about storage with him.
Planning is hard, especially
storage.
when you don't know where the industry is going to go and you don't know what next acquisition your company is going to make or what new next skunkworks project.
Yep.
So how do you plan for the unknowable? You build really flexible architectures that can grow in interesting ways on demand. Oh, that sounds like Evergreen One. Oops, I wasn't supposed to say the name, but that's what it is.
No, that's all right. Well, and that was the customer we had at the Gartner IOCS event, right? City and County of Denver. who adopted it, and they needed to bring new government services on 3 or 4 years ago during a difficult time, and that's what gave them that flexibility. Well, we're going on and on here. I think we've hit this at the right altitude, at the right depth. We're at the end. We've hit the end of 6 episodes covering the 15 architectural decisions. I want to thank you both for that. Andrew, JD, do you guys want to hit with a quick closer on what we've hit through here? Andrew, you want to go first with kind of a just what this all means if people are making it to the end of this 6th episode where we've hit all these architectural decisions. We've tried to put them all together so they're easy for people to understand and learn, and even gone back historically with Professor of History, JD.
So for those who may not know, I started on the customer side for about 7 years in IT operations. And so some of the stuff that we've talked about here, and hopefully folks feel the flavor, and JD as well, it resonates to who I was and what I lived through. And some of this would have made my life so much better. And so there's this kind of joy in unpacking the layers of technology and seeing like, okay, if I start here, it works this way, and then I can layer this on top, and I know it'll work at maybe an engineering level to even architecture level, operations. And so some of this for me is even diving into this series and even hearing about these concepts when I joined Pure about 6 years ago reflects a little bit of my own personal history and learning about the industry. And it's so cool to have stuff that actually truly works in real life and also achieves upper order goals. And not sometimes in your career you wander to like, oh, there are other people who take care of these problems. No, we actually can solve them in a better way for the practitioners and even help them move into new areas from a career standpoint.
Sure.
As we can also align to CFO metrics or CIO metrics about maybe 10x less people to administer, not about letting people go, but about letting them actually move into new areas that they should actually embrace around automation and Kubernetes and cloud and whatever other things there may be new trends that are coming. So there is always this piece of IT is always changing. The only constant is change. Sorry for the buzzword, but that actually brings this cool thing of you can actually create and build stuff that actually helps people at a very foundational level, both at a business level, technology standpoint, and personal impact. We hit on the personal impact.
Yeah.
And that's what's really gratifying about this stuff. Technology is easy. People are hard, but there's way more gratifying.
That's right.
Being able to help people.
Well, it's just fun to stand behind something that you believe in too, that you know is legit.
Yeah. For me, I really just appreciate, and I hope our customers and our audience appreciates the opportunity to kind of dive a little bit deeper into something that we don't have a lot of opportunity to talk about a lot.
No.
I mean, this is something that this was something that was an internal document that we talked about in the very early days of the company with our engineering teams, our sales engineers. This is not the kind of story that you would typically go tell in its entirety to a customer. It's too long. There's too much depth.
It's not the right thing to do.
And a lot of it, we talk about the value that you derive from it, but the actual engineering itself, that's kind of back end stuff. And so one of the things I really appreciate is as our brand and reputation has grown, people want to hear more and more and more about how we got here. And, I'm telling people all the time to go read our book. Flash was only the beginning.
Right.
Gives you a great inside view into kind of the early company culture, the early personalities, a lot of the why the business was built the way it was built. And Rob and Andrew, I appreciate the opportunity to come together with you guys and tell this story because I think it's a great technical complement to go with something like that book, Flash was only the beginning. It's another inside look into how we got started and what we believe and the ideas that carry through our engineering decisions today.
Yeah, it's part of the lore, but it's also the practicality of what we're still doing. And so what I liked about each of these segments that we did is we definitely let people understand, and you, the listener, know this, or the viewer, what it is and why we made that decision. But I think in almost every case, there was a modern update to what we have done and how we have evolved, which really solidifies the power of those initial decisions that were made years and years ago and strengthens kind of what we've been talking about. So I love that.
I realized I had one last brief one. And
Yes.
This was a great discussion with actually one of the gentlemen who was on stage for that initial presentation internally, Alex McMullen, with Pure as a field CTO. So I want to make sure to attribute to him,
Yeah,
but I believe it too.
He needs the plug.
That Evergreen is not just a business model, not just technology. Absolutely is. But it's our culture.
Right.
It's pervasive through the entire culture up here in the way that we approach things.
Well, and part of the culture is the energy that people put into things they think are meaningful. So I want to thank both of you in this last episode because I know you both spent a lot of time researching, going back through the historicals, watching that video from that sales kickoff, and also printing out a 46-page document and going through it in relatively deep detail so that we could come and articulate this at the right altitude. JD, you just said it. It's not something that people can go find on a website really easily. It's internal, but there's still stories that we can tell and articulate externally in this forum. And everybody's just gotten insight. And we've done it so, as we said at the top, you don't have to go through 15 hours worth of podcasts that we did over the last 3 years.
22-minute mark, 35-minute mark.
And to be clear for everybody, this is how we are kicking off this beautiful studio that you see here. This is so important that this is what we wanted to go off and to do for you. So with that, I will say thank you both.
Thank you.
And for the viewers and the listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this immensely. We have. Please share it. Get it out to colleagues, get it to friends. I'm not even going to do links, just check. We're going to add links into the episode descriptions when we post them. So check out places. You can always go to purestorage.com to learn more about pretty much everything that we discussed here is still going to be what you can find on the website, but it's woven into different places, as JD stated a moment ago. But thank you for making it through all of these episodes with us. If you only caught this one 6, go back. There's 5 more before this where we go through, and please do reach out. You can find all of us on LinkedIn at Andrew Miller, at JD Wallace, Rob Ludeman, and it's a pleasure to host and do this with you both.
It's a pleasure, Rob.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the
Always
time.
fun, always fun. And with that, we will wrap the 15 architectural decisions. We did it, gentlemen. For Pure Storage, for Andrew Miller, for JD Wallace, this is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.